The massive doors of the Galactic Council chambers slid open with a deep hum that echoed through the vast hall. Ambassador Lisa Carter walked through them with calm steps, her black diplomatic uniform pressed and perfect. Behind her, Commander Jake Morrison followed in silence, his military dress blues a sharp contrast to the flowing robes and strange clothing of the alien delegates. Already seated around the enormous circular table, Lisa took her place at the human section, a modest area compared to the grand platforms given to the older species. The Zealothi had crystal formations that caught the chamber's light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. The Thrain occupied a raised section that buzzed with the constant sound of their insect-like communication. The Corvani delegation sat in environmental suits filled with their methane atmosphere, while dozens of other species filled the remaining spaces. 3 years had passed since humanity had been allowed to join the Galactic Council. 3 years of careful words, patient negotiations, and endless meetings about trade routes, mining rights, and territorial boundaries. Lisa had learned to smile when the other species talked down to her. She had learned to nod politely when they explained things to her as if she were a child. She had learned to thank them for their wisdom when they blocked human requests with barely hidden contempt. Today was supposed to be different. Today they were finally going to discuss human mining rights in the Kepler sector, a region of space that had valuable minerals and plenty of room for human expansion. Lisa had spent months preparing for this moment, gathering data, making proposals, and building what she hoped would be convincing arguments. Krikstal, the lead Zealothi representative, rose from his crystal platform. His body was tall and thin, made of what looked like living diamond. When he spoke, his voice rang like wind chimes in a storm. Fellow council members, we gather today to discuss the human request for mining privileges in Sector Kepler 7749. The way he said human request made it sound like something dirty. Lisa kept her face calm and professional, but inside she felt the familiar burn of anger that she had learned to control over the past 3 years. The Zealothi Collective has reviewed the human proposal, Krikstal continued, his crystalline features catching the light as he turned to look directly at Lisa. We find it lacking in several key areas. The humans demonstrate a concerning lack of understanding regarding galactic mining protocols. Their technology appears insufficient for the delicate work required in that sector. Most importantly, they have not proven their ability to work alongside established galactic civilizations without disruption. War Queen Zakth of the Thrain clicked her mandibles in what Lisa had learned was their version of laughter. The insectoid creature was nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and compound eyes that never seemed to blink. The Zealothi speak truth, she buzzed. Young species often reach beyond their capabilities. Perhaps humans should focus on simpler tasks before attempting complex mining operations. Lisa stood slowly, her hands clasped behind her back in the formal diplomatic pose she had practiced thousands of times. Honored council members, I appreciate your concerns. However, I believe our proposal addresses all standard safety and efficiency requirements. Human mining technology has proven effective in our own system, and we have successfully completed 3 joint operations with Corvani partners. Small operations, interrupted Vexter, a Corvani delegate whose voice came through his suit speaker. With mechanical precision, nothing comparable to the scale required in Kepler sector. The Hegemony Coalition has managed that region for 200 years. Why should we risk disruption for an untested species? The Hegemony Coalition. Lisa had heard that term in every major council session since humanity joined. It was not an official organization, but everyone knew it existed. The Zealothi, Thrain, and Corvani worked together to control the most profitable regions of galactic space. They made decisions in private meetings and then presented united fronts in the council chambers. Any species that challenged them found their proposals blocked, their trade routes restricted, and their expansion limited. I understand the Coalition's experience in that sector, Lisa said carefully. That is exactly why we believe a partnership would benefit everyone. Human innovation combined with your established infrastructure could increase efficiency by 30%, according to our projections. Krickstahl's crystal body flashed with colors that Lisa had learned indicated amusement. Human innovation. Yes, we have observed your species' tendency toward what you call creativity. Unfortunately, established galactic practices exist for good reasons. Your unpredictable methods could endanger operations that have run smoothly for generations. Commander Morrison shifted slightly behind Lisa. It was barely noticeable, but she caught the movement. She knew what it meant. Jake had been a soldier long before he became a diplomatic attach. He understood threats and power games better than most civilians. The slight tension in his shoulders told her that he was reading the room the same way she was. This was not a negotiation. This was a demonstration. The Hegemony Coalition was showing the rest of the Council what happened when newer species got ideas above their station. They were using humanity as an example of why the established order should not be challenged. Perhaps, Lisa said with the same patient tone she had used in hundreds of similar situations, we could discuss a smaller trial operation, something that would allow us to prove our capabilities without disrupting existing arrangements. War Queen. Zakth clicked her mandibles again. Even small disruptions can have large consequences. The Thrain Collective believes humans should focus on developing their skills in less critical areas. There are asteroid belts in your home system that remain unmined. Surely, that would provide adequate resources for your growing population. Insult was clear to everyone in the chamber. The asteroid belts around Earth had been picked clean decades ago. Everyone knew that. The Thrain was suggesting that humans should be satisfied with scraps while the major powers controlled the galaxy's wealth. Lisa felt something cold settle in her stomach. It was the same feeling she had experienced many times over the past 3 years, but today it felt different. Today it felt final. She looked around the chamber at the faces and forms of dozens of alien species. Some watched with interest, others with boredom. None of them showed any sign of support for the human position. She touched the small communication device hidden in her sleeve, sending a coded signal that would reach every human ship and station within 50 light years. The message was simple. Diplomatic patience had reached its limit. Captain Roy Bennett, commanding the human vessel Defender in orbit above the Council world, received the signal and smiled. He had been waiting for this moment for months. Around him, his crew began implementing protocols that had been planned in secret for over a year. Back in the Council chamber, Lisa Carter stood with the same diplomatic composure she had maintained for 3 years. But something had changed in her eyes, something that the alien delegates were too arrogant to notice. I see, she said quietly. Thank you for making your position so clear. The emergency alert came at 0347 hours Galactic Standard Time. Mining Station Omega-7 had gone silent in the middle of its regular transmission cycle. Captain Roy Bennett stood on the bridge of the Defender, watching the long-range sensors as they painted a grin picture across the main display screen. Where Omega-7 should have been broadcasting its steady beacon, there was nothing. No radio signals, no energy readings, no signs of life. Just empty space and slowly expanding clouds of debris that had once been a home to 300 human souls. How long since last contact? Bennett asked his communications officer, Lieutenant. Emma Rodriguez checked her console with quick, practiced movements. 14 hours, sir. They missed their scheduled check-in, but we thought it might be equipment trouble. The automated distress beacon never activated. Bennett felt his jaw tighten. Omega-7 was a research and mining facility built inside. a large asteroid in the disputed border region between human space and Coalition territory. It housed families, scientists, and miners who had volunteered for the dangerous but profitable work of extracting rare minerals from the asteroid belt. They were civilians, protected by every galactic treaty that supposedly governed civilized space. "Send a recovery team," Bennett ordered. "I want to know what happened out there." 6 hours later, the answers came back in a report that made Bennett's hands shake with rage. The recovery team had found bodies floating in space, pieces of the station scattered across thousands of kilometers, and evidence of weapons fire that could only have come from military-grade plasma cannons. The type used by Coalition forces docked down on the Council world. Ambassador Lisa Carter received the news. While she was preparing for another day of diplomatic meetings, she read the report twice, her face growing paler with each detail. 300 people dead, 67 children among them. Families who had trusted that the galactic community would protect civilians even in disputed territory. She walked into the emergency council session that had been called to address what the Coalition representatives were calling an unfortunate accident in a dangerous region of space. The chamber felt different today. The usual background noise of alien conversations had died down to nervous whispers. Krickstahl stood at his crystal platform, his body reflecting the chamber lights in sharp, cold patterns. The Zelethi Collective expresses regret for the loss of human life in the Omega incident. However, we must note that this facility was constructed in violation of established territorial boundaries. The humans were warned that this region was unsafe for civilian operations. War Queen Zakth clicked her mandibles in agreement. The Thrain Collective offered to provide security escorts for human operations in that sector. The offer was declined. Perhaps if humans had accepted proper guidance from experienced spacefaring species, this tragedy could have been avoided. Lisa stood slowly, her diplomatic training fighting against the white-hot anger burning in her chest. Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of species watched her with expressions ranging from sympathy to indifference. None of them looked surprised by the Coalition's response. 300 civilians are dead, she said, her voice steady despite the fury she felt. Our investigation shows clear evidence of military weapons fire. This was not an accident or a mining mishap. This was an attack. Vexter's mechanical voice came through his environmental suit speaker. The Corvani have reviewed the available data. While the loss of life is regrettable, space mining is inherently dangerous. Equipment failures can mimic weapons damage. Without more conclusive evidence, we cannot support accusations against any galactic civilization. The words hit Lisa like physical blows. They were not even pretending to investigate. They were dismissing the murder of 300 humans as an unfortunate mistake and suggesting that humanity was too primitive to understand what had really happened. "We request a full independent investigation," Lisa said, fighting to keep her diplomatic tone, "and appropriate compensation for the families of the victims." Krickstahl's crystal body flashed with what Lisa now recognized as barely contained contempt. Compensation? For the consequences of human recklessness? The Zelethi Collective suggests that newer species should focus on learning proper safety protocols before demanding payment for their mistakes. War Queen Zakth's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Perhaps human technology is simply not advanced enough for deep space operations. Your constructs may be too fragile for the harsh realities of frontier mining. It would be wise to accept your limitations. Something snapped inside Lisa Carter at that moment. 3 years of patient diplomacy, 3 years of swallowing insults and accepting condescension, 3 years of playing by rules that the Coalition had written to keep humanity in its place. And now they were blaming human victims for their own murders. She reached into her sleeve and activated a hidden communication device. sending a coded message that would travel faster than light to every human military commander in known space. The message was simple: gloves off. Commander Jake Morrison, who had been standing silently behind Lisa throughout the session, stepped forward. His movement was casual, almost lazy, but there was something in his eyes that had not been there during the previous 3 years of diplomatic meetings. "Ambassador Carter," he said in a voice that carried clearly through the vast chamber, "I believe it's time we showed our friends what human diplomacy really looks like when our people are murdered." Lisa nodded once, sharp and final. "I think you're right, Commander." Across human space, the message was received and understood. Captain Bennett smiled grimly as he read the coded transmission on his personal display. Around him, his crew began, implementing procedures that had been planned and rehearsed in secret for over 2 years. The human merchant vessel Prosperity, operating near the Zelothi trade hub at Kepler Station, suddenly changed course. Its cargo pods detached and drifted away, revealing the sleek hull of a destroyer that had been hiding beneath them. Captain Danny Walsh ordered his weapon systems online for the first time since leaving human space. The research ship Discovery, currently docked at a Thrain scientific facility, began what appeared to be routine maintenance procedures. But the panels being removed revealed not scientific equipment, but military sensor arrays and missile launchers that had been concealed behind false bulkheads. Lieutenant Sam Peterson, commanding the diplomatic escort Fortune near the Corvani homeworld, sent what appeared to be a routine supply request to nearby human vessels. Within minutes, 12 ships that had been classified as civilian transports converged on his position, their true nature becoming clear as hidden weapon systems powered up in the council chamber. The alien representatives continued their dismissive discussion of human limitations and the need for newer species to accept their place in the galactic order. They did not notice the subtle change in Ambassador Carter's posture, or the way Commander Morrison's hand had moved to rest on what they had assumed was a ceremonial sword. They were about to learn that humans had been playing a very different game than they realized. The diplomatic mask was coming off, and underneath it was something that had been waiting patiently for 3 years to be released. The galaxy's apex. Predators had decided to stop pretending to be harmless. Admiral Kelly Brooks stood on the bridge of her flagship Retribution as hundreds of human vessels dropped their disguises across the galaxy. For 3 years, she had commanded what the aliens believed was a peaceful exploration fleet. Today, they would learn the truth. The Retribution itself had been registered as a deep space research vessel, complete with fake scientific equipment and a crew that played their roles perfectly during alien inspections. But beneath the false panels and behind the dummy laboratories was one of the most advanced warships ever built by human hands. "All stations report ready, Admiral," called out her tactical officer, Lieutenant Helen Young. Around the bridge, crew, members who had pretended to be botanists and archaeologists, now sat at weapons consoles and strategic planning stations. Brooks nodded and opened a fleet-wide communication channel. "This is Admiral Brooks to all human forces. Operation Apex is now active. You know your targets. You know your mission. Show them what we really are." The first strike hit the Zelothi military outpost at Rigel 4. Captain Danny Walsh, whose ship had been disguised as a cultural exchange vessel for 8 months, dropped his false cargo pods and revealed the sleek lines of a heavy destroyer. His weapons officer, Sergeant Amy Clark, had spent those 8 months studying Zelothi defense patterns while pretending to be an anthropologist studying their crystal formations. "Target their command tower first," Walsh ordered. "They think their crystal formations make them invulnerable. Let's show them what happens when you study something for 8 months straight." The human weapons had been designed specifically to exploit weaknesses that Amy had discovered during her fake research. Zelothi crystals were strong against energy weapons, but shattered under precise kinetic strikes at their natural fault lines. The outpost's main defenses collapsed in less than 3 minutes. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Sam Peterson was leading an attack on a Thrain hive world in the Beta Sector. His ships had been operating as a merchant convoy, bringing trade goods and cultural gifts to the insectoid aliens for over a year. The Thrain had welcomed them, pleased to have new customers for their manufactured goods. What the Thrain didn't know was that Peterson's crew had been studying their hive mind communication network the entire time. Captain Lisa Turner, posing as a trade negotiator, had actually been a cyber warfare specialist, mapping every frequency and protocol the insects used to coordinate their fleets. "Jam their hive link on my mark," Peterson ordered. Turner's fingers flew across her console, sending carefully crafted signals that mimicked Thrain thought patterns, but carried false information. Within minutes, the Thrain fleet was attacking its own support vessels, convinced by the false signals that they had been infiltrated by enemies. The Corvani discovered that their methane-breathing physiology, which they thought made them safe in their environmental suits, had been thoroughly studied by human medical researchers who had spent months working in their hospitals. Colonel Steve Johnson's assault team knew exactly where to strike to breach Corvani life support systems without causing permanent harm. The aliens found themselves unconscious but alive, their military installations captured intact. Back in the council chambers, emergency alarms began wailing as reports flooded in from across coalition space. Ambassador Lisa Carter sat calmly at the human delegation table while alien representatives screamed demands and accusations. Crixtal's crystal body flashed with angry red light. "This is an act of unprovoked aggression. The humans have violated every treaty and agreement." War Queen Zaxth buzzed frantically as she tried to coordinate her scattered forces through disrupted communication channels. "The Thrain Collective demands immediate cessation of human attacks. This barbaric behavior proves that your species is unfit for galactic society." Lisa stood slowly, her diplomatic composure intact even as explosions lit up the view screens showing coalition territories under assault. "Barbaric behavior? You mean like murdering 300 civilians and calling it an accident?" "Vexter?" Mechanical voice crackled with static as his suit's system struggled with electronic interference from human cyber attacks. "The Corvani protest this unprovoked assault on peaceful installations." "Peaceful?" Commander Morrison stepped forward, no longer bothering to hide the predatory smile that had been lurking behind his diplomatic mask for 3 years. "You call military outposts that launch attacks on civilian mining stations peaceful?" The truth was becoming clear to everyone in the chamber. The humans had not simply lost their tempers and launched a desperate attack. This was coordinated, planned, and devastatingly effective. Every strike was hitting exactly the right target with exactly the right weapon to cause maximum damage. General Paul Rodriguez coordinated the assault on 17 different worlds from his command ship, the previously disguised agricultural research vessel, New Harvest. His staff officers, who had posed as farming specialists and food scientists, revealed themselves as some of humanity's best military strategists. "Phase 2 is go," Rodriguez announced. "Begin psychological operations." Captain Helen Young's team, operating from what the aliens had believed was a medical research ship, began broadcasting carefully crafted messages to coalition forces. The messages suggested that humanity's real target was complete galactic domination, and that any species not actively fighting against humans would be considered collaborators. Within hours, coalition member species were accusing each other of secret deals with humanity. The Gelathi suspected the Thrain of betraying defense codes. The Thrain accused the Corvani of providing intelligence to human forces. The Corvani were convinced that both their partners had sold them out. The psychological warfare was devastatingly effective because it played on fears that were already present. The coalition had stayed together through mutual distrust and careful balance of power. Now that balance was shattered, and each species was looking out for itself, Admiral Brooks watched the tactical displays as coalition fleets pulled back from forward positions to defend their home territories. The unified front that had controlled galactic politics for centuries was crumbling in real time. Admiral, called Lieutenant Young from her station, were receiving surrender requests from 12 minor coalition outposts. They're asking for terms. Brooks considered this for a moment. The plan had always been to break coalition power, not to conquer the galaxy. Humanity wanted respect and fair treatment, not an empire built on fear. Accept surrenders from any installation that stands down immediately, she ordered. Tell them that humans don't want to rule over other species. We just want to be treated as equals instead of primitive children. Back on Earth, President Alan Baker prepared to address not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. His speech would define how the universe saw humanity from this day forward. My fellow humans, he began, his words being broadcast to every human. Settlement and simultaneously transmitted to alien governments across the galaxy. We came to the stars in peace. We offered friendship to those we met. We followed their rules and accepted their guidance. We tried diplomacy first, always. He paused, looking directly into the camera that would carry his image to billions of alien viewers. But when they murdered our people and called it an accident, when they treated our restraint as weakness, when they made it clear that they would never accept us as equals, we showed them what we really are. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the difference between choosing peace and being incapable of war. Humanity had spent 3 years demonstrating that they preferred civilization to violence. But they had also spent those 3 years preparing for the moment when violence became necessary. The apex predators had revealed themselves, and their prey was discovering that all the diplomatic smiles and patient negotiations had been the behavior of hunters who preferred not to hunt, but were perfectly capable of doing so when circumstances required it. Colonel Steve Johnson stood at the edge of the Zealothi capital city, watching his soldiers move through the crystal spires with deadly precision. What should have been an impossible assault on the most defended world in coalition space had become a textbook example of how superior tactics could overcome superior technology. The Zealothi had built their cities like fortresses, with crystal walls that could withstand plasma bombardment and energy shields that had never been breached. But they had never faced an enemy that understood the fundamental weakness of their crystalline architecture. Sergeant Amy Clark led her squad through the sewage tunnels beneath the city, carrying shaped charges designed to create resonance frequencies that would shatter crystal at the molecular level. The Zealothi had never considered that their beautiful, indestructible buildings could be turned into weapons against them. Charges set at foundation points 7 through 12, Amy reported. Through her COM unit, ready to bring down the Eastern Defense Grid on your command. Johnson smiled grimly. The Zealothi had welcomed human cultural exchanges, proud to show off their advanced architecture to the primitive newcomers. They had never suspected that the humans asking detailed questions about crystal formation and structural engineering were actually military specialists planning an invasion. Execute, Johnson ordered. The explosions were small and precisely placed, but their effects were devastating. The resonance frequencies traveled through the crystal matrix of the city, shattering defensive walls and collapsing shield generators. What had taken the Zealothi centuries to build fell apart in minutes. Meanwhile, General Paul Rodriguez was coordinating the assault on the Thrain homeworld from orbit. The insectoid species had always been proud of their hive mind advantage, believing that their instantaneous communication gave them an unbeatable tactical edge. They were learning that advantages had become weaknesses when facing an enemy that understood how to exploit them. Captain Lisa Turner's cyber warfare team had spent 18 months studying Thrain thought patterns while posing as researchers, interested in collective intelligence. Now they were using that knowledge to inject false information directly into the hive mind network. Sending ghost signals now, Turner reported. The Thrain military command thinks their eastern flank is under attack by a full human division. Rodriguez watched his tactical display as thousands of Thrain warriors rushed to defend against an attack that didn't exist, leaving their real positions vulnerable to the human forces advancing from the west. Beautiful work, Rodriguez said. Move our ground teams in while they're distracted. The Thrain had never imagined that their greatest strength could be turned against them so completely. Their hive mind, which allowed perfect coordination in battle, became a liability when that coordination was based on false information fed directly into their collective consciousness. On the Corvani homeworld, Captain Danny Walsh led his troops through the methane-rich atmosphere in specially designed suits. The Corvani had believed their toxic environment made them safe from invasion, but human adaptability had overcome that advantage as well. Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez coordinated the assault on the Corvani command center, her team moving through the alien city with the confidence of soldiers who had spent months studying every street and building. The Corvani had proudly given tours to human diplomats, never suspecting that those diplomats were memorizing defensive positions and escape routes. Corvani forces are falling back to their secondary command bunker, Rodriguez reported. There, using the exact retreat pattern we observed during their military exercises 6 months ago. Walsh nodded. The Corvani had invited human observers to watch their training exercises as a gesture of trust and friendship. Those observers had been intelligence officers who mapped every tactical doctrine and defensive protocol the aliens used. Cut them off at Junction 7, Walsh ordered. They'll surrender when they realize we know their playbook better than they do. Back in the council chambers, the alien representatives watched in growing horror as reports came in from their military commands. The humans were not just winning, they were demonstrating a level of tactical knowledge that seemed impossible for a species that had only been in space. For a few centuries, Krikstal's crystal body had lost its usual bright glow, now dim with what humans recognized as the Zelithy equivalent of despair. How did they know about our resonance frequencies? That information is classified at the highest levels of our military. War Queen Zokt H buzzed frantically, her mandibles clicking. In distress, they are inside our hive mind. They know our thoughts before we think them. This is impossible. Ambassador Lisa Carter stood calmly in the center of the chaos, her diplomatic composure intact, even as the galaxy's most powerful alliance crumbled around her. Nothing is impossible when you have 3 years to prepare and your enemies keep underestimating you. Vexter's mechanical voice crackled through his suit's damaged speakers. The Corvani demand to know how humans obtained classified tactical information. Our security protocols are absolute. Commander Morrison stepped forward, his predatory smile now fully visible. Your security protocols assumed that the friendly diplomats and cultural exchange students you welcomed were actually friendly diplomats and cultural exchange students. The truth hit the alien representatives like a physical blow. Every human who had visited their worlds, every cultural exchange, every scientific collaboration, every diplomatic meeting had been an intelligence-gathering operation. For 3 years, humanity had been studying their enemies while pretending to be naive newcomers seeking friendship. Admiral Brooks broadcast a message to all coalition forces from her flagship. This is Admiral Kelly Brooks of the human fleet. Your military resistance is collapsing. Your homeworlds are occupied. Your alliance is broken. But we are not your enemies unless you choose to be ours. The message was being heard across the galaxy, and its implications were clear. Humanity had demonstrated that they could destroy the coalition whenever they chose. But they were offering a way out, a chance for peace on equal terms. Surrender now, Orcs continued, and you will. Be treated with honor. Your worlds will be returned to your control. Your people will be safe. All we ask is that you remember this lesson when the next species comes seeking membership in the galactic community. On the Thrane homeworld, War Queen Zaxth felt the weight of total defeat pressing down on her. Her hive mind was in chaos. Her military was scattered, and her cities were occupied by human forces that seemed to know every secret her species had ever kept. Captain Helen Young approached the fallen queen under a flag of truce, her weapons holstered but clearly visible. Your Majesty, my commander offers you terms of surrender. Your people will not be harmed if you order your forces to stand down. Zaxth looked at the human soldier, seeing clearly for the first time what her species had missed for 3 years. This was not a primitive newcomer seeking guidance. This was a predator that had chosen to offer mercy instead of annihilation. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Helen's smile was not cruel, but it was utterly confident. "We want what we have always wanted: respect, equality, fair treatment in galactic affairs. The difference is that now you know the consequences of refusing those things." Across Coalition space, the same conversation was happening on dozens of worlds. Human commanders were offering terms that were surprisingly generous considering their overwhelming victory. They wanted political change, not conquest. They wanted to be treated as equals, not to rule over others. President Allen Baker's voice reached every corner of the galaxy as he delivered his final message of the campaign. "We came in peace, but we were prepared for war. We offered friendship, but we were ready for enemies. We are explorers and scientists and artists, but we are also the most dangerous predators this galaxy has ever seen." His words carried the weight of absolute truth, backed by the evidence of coalition worlds under human occupation. Remember this day. Remember that we chose diplomacy first, and violence only when diplomacy failed. Remember that we chose mercy when we could have chosen destruction. The galaxy was learning that the most dangerous enemies were not those who chose violence first, but those who were capable of perfect violence when violence became necessary. Humanity had revealed itself as apex predators sophisticated enough to prefer civilization, but deadly enough to destroy any civilization that threatened them. The age of human diplomatic patience was over. The age of human equality in galactic affairs was about to begin. 6 months after the war ended, Admiral Kelly Brooks walked through the rebuilt corridors of what had once been Coalition Central Command. The massive space station now served as the headquarters for the new Galactic Peace Council, where representatives from every known species worked together under very different rules than before. The war had lasted exactly 43 days. Not because humanity couldn't have ended it sooner, but because they had chosen to make it a lesson that would echo through galactic history for generations to come. Every coalition world had been occupied, every fleet disabled, every symbol of their power reduced to rubble or surrender, but the occupation had been surprisingly gentle. Human forces had focused on military targets while protecting civilian populations. They had provided medical aid to wounded aliens and maintained supply lines to prevent starvation. Most importantly, they had kept their promise to return conquered worlds to their original governments once new treaties were signed. Ambassador Lisa Carter stood in the reformed council chambers, watching as the Zealothi representative Crystal approached her station. His crystal body still glowed, but the arrogant brightness had been replaced by something that looked almost like respect. "Ambassador Carter," he said, his wind chime voice careful and measured, "the Zealothi Collective wishes to discuss the new mining rights proposals for the Kepler sector." Lisa smiled politely, the same diplomatic expression she had worn for 3 years. But now everyone in the chamber understood what lay beneath that smile. "Of course, Representative Crystal. I believe you'll find our updated proposal addresses all the concerns you raised 6 months ago." The difference in his tone was remarkable. Where once he had spoken to her like a teacher correcting a child, now he addressed her as an equal who commanded respect. The proposal he was reviewing was nearly identical to the one the coalition had rejected before the war, but now it was being discussed with careful attention to human interests. War Queen Zakth approached the human delegation table with movements that were noticeably more cautious than before. The Thrain leader had learned painful lessons about underestimating human capabilities, and those lessons showed in every gesture. The Thrain Collective accepts the human proposal for joint scientific research. She buzzed, her mandibles clicking. And what humans had learned was nervous respect. "We believe that human innovation combined with Thrain experience will benefit both species." Commander Jake Morrison, now promoted to general, stood behind Lisa's chair with the same military bearing he had always maintained. But something had changed in how the aliens looked at him. Where once they had seen a ceremonial guard, now they saw exactly what he was: a predator in uniform who had chosen restraint over violence. The smaller galactic civilizations had adapted to the new reality with remarkable speed. Species that had been crushed under coalition dominance for centuries suddenly found themselves protected by human naval patrols. Captain Danny Walsh's fleet maintained order in regions that had been lawless since before most humans were. BORN Dr. Emma Rodriguez, formerly Lieutenant Rodriguez, ran the new Galactic Medical Exchange from her base on the former Corvani homeworld. The environmental specialists who had once posed as peaceful researchers now worked openly to improve living conditions on worlds that had suffered under coalition exploitation. The irony was not lost on anyone that the galaxy had become more peaceful under the protection of its most dangerous predators. Captain Lisa Turner established the new protocols for interstellar communication from her station aboard the Retribution. Her cyber warfare expertise, once used to break enemy codes and disrupt alien communications, now protected smaller species from the kind of information warfare that had destroyed the coalition. Any species could maintain their independence and culture under the new system, but attacks on civilian populations would trigger what had become known throughout the galaxy as Apex Protocol, the systematic dismantling of any government that chose violence over negotiation. The protocol had only been invoked twice in the 6 months since the war ended. Both times, the targeted governments had surrendered within hours rather than face the full attention of human military forces. General Paul Rodriguez oversaw the integration of former coalition territories into the new galactic order. His occupation forces had earned grudging respect from the populations they governed, not through fear, but through competent administration and genuine care for civilian welfare. The former coalition worlds discovered that human rule was nothing like what they had expected. Instead of the brutal oppression that had characterized their own empire, they found efficient government that actually served the people rather than exploiting them. Sergeant Amy Clark ran training programs for local security forces on the former Zelethi worlds. The crystal cities had been rebuilt using human engineering techniques that made them stronger while preserving their beautiful aesthetic. The Zelethi had learned that human innovation could enhance their culture rather than destroy it. President Alan Baker delivered his annual address to the Galactic Assembly from Earth. His words carried live to every inhabited world in known space. The tradition had begun during the war and continued as a symbol of the new galactic order. 1 year ago, he said, looking directly into the cameras that would broadcast his image across the galaxy, we demonstrated that humanity chooses diplomacy over violence, civilization over conquest, cooperation over domination. But we also demonstrated that these choices come from strength, not weakness. His words carried the weight of absolute authority, backed by the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. We remain committed to peaceful exploration and scientific advancement. We welcome new species to the galactic community with open arms. We protect those who cannot protect themselves." Baker paused, his expression growing serious. "But we also remember the lesson that some of you had to learn the hard way. Kindness is not weakness, restraint is not inability, and diplomatic patience has limits that are crossed at great peril." Ambassador Carter concluded the new era's first major trade negotiation with representatives from 17 different species. The terms were fair to everyone involved, with human interests balanced against alien needs in ways that would have been impossible under the old coalition system. As the meeting ended, she reflected on how much had changed since that day 6 months ago when human patience had finally run out. The galaxy had learned to see humanity as they truly were. Apex predators sophisticated enough to prefer civilization, but capable of perfect violence when violence became necessary. Krixtal approached her after the session, his crystal body glowing with colors that indicated deep thought. "Ambassador Carter, may I ask you something that has troubled me since the war ended?" Lisa nodded, curious about what the former coalition leader wanted to know. "How long were you planning this? How long were you pretending to be harmless while preparing for war?" Lisa's smile was diplomatic but honest. "We weren't pretending to be harmless, Representative Krixtal. We were hoping that we could remain harmless. Everything we did for 3 years was a genuine attempt at peaceful coexistence." She looked around the chamber at the representatives from dozens of species, all of them now working together under rules that protected the weak and restrained the powerful. "But we learned something important about predators during our evolution. The most successful hunters are those who only hunt when they have to." Krixtal's crystal form pulsed with understanding. "And when you had to hunt, you were ready." "We were always ready," Lisa replied quietly. "We just hoped we would never need to be." The galaxy had entered a new age, one where the apex predators protected the weak instead of preying on them. But everyone understood that this protection came with a price: respect for the predators who had chosen to be guardians instead of conquerors. Humanity had taken its place not through aggression, but by proving that their peaceful nature was a choice they made from a position of overwhelming strength. The galaxy would never again mistake human diplomacy for weakness, because now everyone knew what lay beneath the diplomatic smiles. The most dangerous predators in the galaxy had revealed themselves to be sophisticated enough to prefer peace, but deadly enough to enforce it when necessary.